Hey guys, so in today's video I'm going to be going over what a string index is within Python and how you can call a character within a string. So for example, right here I already have a variable established called string, the variable string, and I'm assigning it a value of 1, 2. Now for this, let's go ahead and print out what this string variable is, and what we get is 1, 2 printed out. Let's say hypothetically that we want to be able to call out this W right here. What we could do is we can always enter a brackets right here, and then we could press 5. Now we're starting at 5, and if we press enter for run, we get W. Now the reason I was able to get W right here is because in Python what happens is it records all of the characters within the string like in memory. So the circle would be 0, N would be 1, the E would be 2, and the space would be 3. And then we'd be able to finish off the T with 4, 5, and 6. So each of these indexes, these string indexes, is assigned to a place in memory within Python that has essentially a value assigned to it, like this 0 right here. And the reason that we're able to call the W is because we're saying, hey, Python, go ahead and call the string index of 5. Now, let's say, for example, we actually wanted to be able to call, let's say this E right here, all the way up to this 5 and the W, right? What we would do is we would go ahead and enter 2:6. Now, this might be a little confusing, but if ever you're confused in Python, just make sure you run the code, and then you can always analyze backwards why something is working. Just kind of a tidbit there. But essentially, we want to call the E up to 5. Now, within Python, the index that we're calling first will be right here. So if ever you see something right here, you will always include this index. That's why we were able to call E. But when we want it to, for example, stop, what we would do is we would say, hey, Python, call up to, but not including this number. So because of that, we are able to call E all the way up to the W for 5. So it might seem a little confusing, but it'd be best if you just kind of played around with it. So we'll just kind of go into some examples. Let's say, for example, you wanted to call this 0 all the way up to this 0. So we'd print the entire thing right here. What we would do, if you had a moment to think about it, like what essentially would you place right here if you had to? What you could do is you could do 0:7. So remember, we start at 0 and we go up to but not including this number right here. And because the last number is 6, we would need to call 7. So if we needed to run this, what would happen is we'd get 1, 2. Now, for those of you that are a little more advanced, what you could also do is you could just get rid of this number. Now, the reason we'd be able to get rid of that number is because we're saying, hey, Python, we still want you to start at 0, and we want you to go until you can't go anymore, because we don't have a value right here. So if we were to run this, again, we would get 1, 2. Now, I might throw you for a little loop when I say this, but let's say, for example, we get rid of this. What do you think would happen? Well, if you guessed that it would print 1, 2, you'd be correct. And again, it would print, obviously, 1, 2. Now, let's say, for example, you wanted to call up to, but not including this 5. How would you be able to do it? What would you enter right here is what I'm getting at. Well, what you could do is you could do 0, 6, and get up to the W, or you can even get rid of this 0. What this is essentially saying is if we run it, we get 1 all the way up to the W. What this is saying right here is we're saying, hey, Python, just start at the beginning. We're not actually calling anything. We don't care. Well, we want you to start from the beginning. And then we want you to go up to, but not including, the 6th index. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind when processing these string indexes. But let's actually make this a little more complex. Let's say, for example, we wanted to count all of these numbers, but we wanted to count them by twos. So we'd start at 0, we'd go 2, 4, and 6. What you could do is you could enter another colon, and then you could just go 2. What's happening right here is this is known as the step. Now with this step, we'll be able to count up the 0 index, which is this circle right here, and then we'll be able to go E, which is 2, and then we'll be able to skip over this space right here and go to the T, and then we'll be able to skip over the W and go to the next O, the circle. So just know that if you see 2 of these colons right here, and then you see another number, that's going to be counting up by however many steps it needs to go beyond. Now, let's say hypothetically, I wanted to be able to call this circle right here, and I wanted you to be able to give me all the way up to this T. What would you do in steps of 2? Well, what you could do is you could start at 0, because we're going to call 0, this circle right here, and we want to say, go ahead and call up to the T. So if we were to do that, then that means we would need to enter 5, right? And what we get is we would start at the 0, and then we go up to 2, and we're skipping 1, and then we'd skip this space again, and we call T. Now, this might seem a little confusing, but given enough practice, eventually you'll be able to catch on to where the start is, where the stop is, and where the step is. And then I'll just kind of leave you with one final thing for counting backwards. Now, let's say hypothetically that we wanted to also be able to call the last circle index. Essentially, what would you do? Well, if you were going to call the 0 or the circle, what you could do is you could do -1. And what this would allow you to run is if we ran it, is you would get the circle. You would get the last circle. Now, if we were to say -2, what do you think would happen? If you ran it, what would happen is we would get the W. So it's counting backwards. And finally, a last thing just to kind of remember is when working with indexes is you could always call them backwards. And if you were to call them backwards, is what I mean by calling them backwards, is we do go -1 and we'd enter 2 colons. Now what this will do is it'll print out everything but backwards. So we're starting out with 2 and then 1, and then obviously it's just going backwards. And likewise, if we were to have, say, a -2, what would happen is it would count backwards in steps of 2. So just kind of remember that when it comes to string index, you'll always start at 0 and you'll go up to but not including the final number. So the start, the stop, which is up to but not including, and then the step. So hopefully you guys found something educational with this video here. If you liked it, please feel free to check out some of my other videos where I talk about the basics of Python. So just thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks, guys.